Then Nebuchadnezzar, in furious rage, commanded that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be brought in. So they brought these men before the king. Now, he was mad, and he's red in the face, it says in one place. Nebuchadnezzar said to them, "Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods, and that you do not worship the golden statue that I've set up? Now," and he lists the instruments again. He says, "Now, if you are ready, when you hear the sound of the horn, the pipe, the lyre, the trigon, the harp, the drum, and the entire musical ensemble, to fall down and worship the statue that I have made well and good." So he's given them a second chance, right? He said, "But if you do not worship, then you shall immediately be thrown into a furnace of blazing fire, and who is the God that will deliver you out of my hands?" Now, that's the ego, right? He's saying, "I'm it. There's nobody going to help you, so you better do what I tell you." Is there something in you that you're afraid of that tells you that? You better pay attention to me. You better worry about me. You better get up in your head and try to fix this, because nothing's going to help you. Oh, you've got one of those. Okay. All right, so let's see what our friends did here. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered the king because they had a faith in God. They'd come from a community where they had learned to have faith in God. They had come from the Jewish community and the Jewish faith. And they said to the king, this is pretty cheeky. They said, "Oh, Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to present a defense to you in this matter. If our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the furnace of blazing fire and out of your hand, O king, let him deliver us. But if not, be it known to you, O king, that we will not serve your gods and we will not worship the golden statue that you've set up." So then Nebuchadnezzar was so filled with rage, I love this, that his face was distorted. Because it can come after you, right? Sometimes you've got these ghouls that seem like they come after you. So then he was so mad that he ordered the furnace heated up 7 times more than was customary. That's right, he's going to win. Okay, and he ordered some of the strongest guards in his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, throw them into the furnace of blazing fire. But the 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell down bound into the furnace of blazing fire. Well, what do you think happened? You know. They were never touched, that's right. Then King Nebuchadnezzar was astonished, and he rose up quickly. He said to his counselors, "Was it not 3 men that we threw bound into the fire?" And they answered the king, "True, O king." And he replied, "But I see 4 men. Interesting. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out, come here." He had a transformative experience right there, didn't he? All of a sudden, he's talking about the Most High God. And the satraps, prefects, governors, and the king's counselors gathered together and saw that the fire had not any power over the bodies of those men. The hair of their heads were not singed, their tunics were not harmed, and not even the smell of fire came from them. That's what happens when we learn to hold on to God, when we learn the spiritual principles, when we learn to keep our focus on God and to let God do the healing work of whatever it is that seems like that 8-story tall, silly statue, and bring us into reality of God, because God's the king, not Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar's not really, he may be an earthly king. That's the human will. But in the Bible, metaphysically, kings always represent the will. Usually the ego will gone wild. We need a will. It's one of our Christ powers. It's the will to discern. It's the will to do God's will, which is always good and good for everybody. But Nebuchadnezzar he kind of learned this, at least in this incident. Okay, so then Nebuchadnezzar said, "Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel," that was the 4th man, right? Or we can think of that as our Christ, "to delivered his servants who trusted in him. They disobeyed the king's command and yielded up their bodies rather than serve and worship any god except their own God." That was quite a turnaround for old Nebuchadnezzar, wasn't it? From his 8-story high statue to, oh my goodness, I guess there's somebody bigger than me. Whoa, who knew? I didn't know. But he was willing, because he saw the evidence, didn't he? You've seen the evidence in your lives. I know you have, right? You've seen it. The deal is to transfer that to whatever the next 8-foot high or 8-story high thing is. I remember that time I saw God. I've got the evidence. God healed me. God transformed this thing. Now, how can I bring that faith and that trust and that experience into this next thing that seems to loom over me, what it is that I'm scared of? And I can say, too, with Nebuchadnezzar, that blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who sent his angel and delivered his servants who trusted in him. They disobeyed the king's command. They didn't bow down to that thing that was so big and so scary. And they yielded up themselves. They said, let go and let God. I'm willing. I'm letting go. I'm letting God. And I'm willing to only serve the real God, who is love and who is abundance and who is truth and who is goodness. When we look at the metaphysical meaning of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, their meanings are meekness. Shadrach is meekness. Meshach is love. And Abednego is wisdom or light. So meekness is not about being a doormat. That's not what it's about. Meekness is about being your right size. It's about knowing I am an expression of God, and all of God's attributes are within me, and yet I am not all of God. There's something greater than me, and I'm part of it. And I'm willing to open up myself to its power. And love is always the universal solvent, always the universal solvent. If you've got something that doesn't seem to move, do everything you can to affirm the power of love, to align with it, to let it bless your life, and that will transform you and everything. And the power of light, the power of wisdom. These are Christ's powers. These are aspects of our God nature. These are aspects of our Christ nature. And when we do that, what happens to us is that the fourth man appears. That angel took care of them. And it took care of them in the midst of something really hot. All that ever gets burned up is our illusions. The real of us can never be touched. And that's what it says, they were not touched. The real of us can never be touched, can never be destroyed, can never be harmed, can never be hurt. We're never alone. We place our trust in God, and we find that the amazing good comes forth.